She woke up feeling the same emptiness that had been with her for many months. The room felt too quiet, too still, and she could not remember. The last time she had felt truly at peace, she moved slowly, getting out of bed and stretching her arms as if trying to reach for something that was never there. The sunlight came through the window, but it did not warm her. It just reminded her of all the mornings she had spent alone. She went to the kitchen and made a cup of tea, but even the warmth of the cup in her hands did not make her feel any better. She looked out of the window at the street below and saw people walking quickly to places that seemed important. She wondered if anyone noticed her, if anyone cared that she was there. She felt invisible, like she could disappear and no one would even notice her absence at work. She kept her head down and tried to focus on the tasks in front of her, but her mind wandered. She remembered conversations she had with friends who had stopped calling and invitations she had declined because she was too tired, too sad to participate. She remembered the words she had whispered to herself in the dark, hoping that someone somewhere would hear, but no one ever had. Even her colleagues noticed something was wrong, but they did not ask. She did not answer questions if they tried to start a conversation. She smiled when it was necessary, but it felt empty, as if her face was acting in a role that did not belong to her. She had become good at pretending that everything was fine, while inside she felt broken. Sometimes she thought about leaving everything behind, moving far away, where no one knew her and no one could see her sadness. She imagined packing a bag and walking to a place where she could disappear. She could feel the longing for peace and quiet, the desire to be somewhere she did not have to pretend she was happy. But every time she thought about running away, she felt afraid, afraid of the unknown, afraid that even there she would still feel lonely. She wanted someone to tell her that it would be okay, that she did not have to be strong all the time, that someone would stay no matter what. She wanted a hand to hold, a voice that said, "I am here for you." Her evenings were the hardest. The world outside became quiet, and she felt trapped inside her own mind. Memories came back of moments she wished she could forget, moments that made her feel guilty and ashamed. She sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall, wishing for a change, wishing for a sign that she was not alone. She remembered the little things that made her feel connected sometimes. A message from a friend, a call from a family member, but those moments were rare and fleeting. She longed for someone who would notice without asking, someone who would understand without needing explanations, someone who would stay at work. One day she stayed late, finishing a project. She did not mind the extra hours because it gave her time to be alone. Without pretending, she heard footsteps in the hallway and saw someone approaching with a gentle smile and a cup of tea. The gesture was small, but it felt like a bridge across the loneliness she had been carrying. She wanted to say thank you, but words felt heavy and she could not find them. The person did not leave. Instead, they sat quietly nearby, letting her sip the tea and work in peace, letting her feel that she was seen, even without saying anything. They did not rush her, did not ask questions. They just were there, and that simple presence started to chip away at the walls she had built around herself. She began to notice small changes in her days. She found herself smiling at things she had ignored before: a song on the radio, a funny moment with a coworker, a bird singing outside the window. She noticed that her chest felt lighter at times, that the weight of loneliness did not press as hard. She started to look forward to little moments, to the presence of someone who quietly cared. Evan. With these changes, the sadness did not disappear completely. There were mornings when it still felt heavy, and nights when memories kept her awake. But she felt a shift, something subtle but real. She began to believe that maybe she did not have to face everything alone. Maybe someone could stay, maybe someone could care without expecting anything in return. She remembered words she had read once about strength. It's not always being about standing alone, but sometimes about letting someone stand with you. She wanted to believe that she could allow herself that. She wanted to trust that the presence of someone could be enough to keep the darkness at bay. She went home that evening and sat by the window looking at the stars. She felt a strange mix of hope and fear, a desire to be seen, and a fear of letting anyone in. But for the first time in a long while, she felt that she might be able to share her world with someone who would not leave, someone who would stay. She made small changes in her routine, noticing the little things that brought comfort: a warm cup of tea, a quiet walk, a kind word. She started listening to her own heart and thoughts more gently, and found that they were not as frightening when someone else was quietly present somewhere near. The days passed, and she slowly began to let down the walls she had built over the years. She still had her moments of sadness and fear, but she started to notice that the world was not entirely empty. She began to allow herself small joys, small connections, small moments of warmth and comfort that she had denied herself before. Though she did not know what the future held, she felt a tiny spark of something she had not felt in a long time, a feeling that maybe she was not truly alone, that maybe someone could be there through the hard times, through the quiet moments, through everything that had made her feel invisible. She stayed late at work one evening, finishing a report that seemed endless. The office was quiet. Except for the hum of computers and the soft tapping of keys, she felt tired in a way that went beyond the body. It was the kind of exhaustion that seeped into the bones, the kind that came from carrying too many silent burdens. She leaned back in her chair and rubbed her eyes, wishing for a moment of peace. He noticed her from across the room, carrying a cup of tea and a quiet presence that did not demand anything. She looked up and gave a small nod, but said nothing. She did not know why. She felt a flicker of curiosity about someone who had noticed her without asking too many questions. He walked slowly closer and set the cup on her desk without speaking. She looked at it and hesitated before taking a sip. It was warm and comforting, and she felt a strange sense of connection to someone who had thought of her. She wanted to say thank you, but the words did not come. Instead, she just looked at him, and he smiled softly, a smile that seemed to carry understanding without needing explanation. He did not sit too close or invade her space. He just stayed nearby, letting her feel that she was not completely invisible in the world over. The next few days she began to notice small gestures from him: a cup of tea on a cold morning, a gentle question about whether she had eaten, a message to check if she had gotten home safely. She did not respond right away, and sometimes she ignored the messages, but she felt them inside, as if someone was quietly saying, "I am here, and I will not leave." She started talking in small ways, telling him things she had not shared with anyone else. The words were slow and careful, little pieces of herself that she had hidden for a long time. She told him about books she loved, about dreams she had put aside, and fears that she had buried. She watched carefully for any hint that he might leave, but he only listened without judgment. Sometimes they sat in silence, and those moments were comfortable in a way she had never experienced before. She did not feel pressure to perform or to pretend to be strong. She could just be. She could let her thoughts flow and know that someone was present, not to fix her, not to change her, but just to be there alongside her. She began to notice a difference. In her days, small joys started to appear: a song on the radio, a moment of sunlight through the window, a laugh that came naturally. She felt a lightness in her chest that she had not felt for months, and she realized that maybe the presence of someone could make life feel less heavy. She started looking forward to the moments she would see him, even if they were brief. There were days when the sadness came back with a force that took her breath away, but even then she did not feel completely alone. She remembered that someone had offered her quiet support, and that memory was enough to keep her moving forward. She began to trust that it was possible for someone to care without leaving. One evening, she shared a memory from her childhood, a story about a pet she had lost. She expected a quick response or a change in the conversation, but he just listened. His eyes were steady and kind, and she felt a strange relief as she spoke freely. For the first time in years, she realized that sharing even small pieces of herself could bring comfort rather than fear. She began to open up more slowly, revealing her worries, her hopes, and even small dreams she had hidden. She was careful at first, holding back the deepest parts of herself, but gradually she learned that being seen did not always mean being judged. She felt safer than she had in a long time, and that safety allowed her to breathe more easily. They started spending more time together in small ways: a walk during lunch, a shared cup of coffee, a quiet conversation in the hallway. These moments were simple, but they carried meaning. She started to feel that someone was willing to invest time and energy into being with her, not for reward, but because it mattered to them. She remembered the nights she had spent crying silently alone, and she compared them to these moments now. She noticed a difference in the heaviness she carried. She could feel that the weight was lifting slowly and steadily. She began to believe that perhaps it was okay to let someone stay, that perhaps it was possible for her to be supported. She thought about the future in a way she had not dared before. Little thoughts about tomorrow and the next day began to appear. She imagined facing challenges not alone, but with someone by her side. She imagined small adventures, simple joys, and moments of shared laughter, and she felt a warmth she had almost forgotten. Event when old fears returned, she started to respond differently. She did not shut down completely. She remembered the quiet presence that had been consistent, and that memory gave her strength. She realized that sometimes the most important thing is not to fix everything, but to have someone who stands beside you. She began to notice changes in herself, too. She smiled more naturally, she laughed more freely, and she allowed herself to enjoy simple pleasures without guilt. She noticed that the quiet support had given her permission to feel. She had given herself permission to feel. She began to reconnect with parts of herself she had long ignored as days turned into weeks. She felt a bond forming, built on small moments shared and trust earned slowly. She did not rush it, she did not force it, she let it grow naturally. And the growth gave her hope. She felt that maybe she could face life without feeling the crushing weight of loneliness. She remembered times when she had doubted herself, times she had believed that no one would stay. She realized now that those fears were powerful, but not permanent. She could allow herself to experience connection and care. She could allow herself to trust again, and the thought filled her with a quiet courage. Her evenings became calmer. She could sit quietly and reflect, without being overwhelmed by fear and sadness. She noticed the world around her more closely, the changing colors of the sky, the soft sound of wind through trees, the small gestures of kindness in daily life. She began to see that life had gentle beauty waiting for her to notice. She began thinking about her dreams again, the ones she had set aside. She imagined small steps to pursue them, the possibility of growth and exploration. She realized that having someone quietly supportive allowed her to see herself in a new light. She could feel hope stirring inside her heart. She also realized that her life had value beyond what she had believed. She had learned to notice small victories, small moments of strength and courage. She began to honor herself for making it through each day. She began to recognize that even in the darkest times she had survived, and that survival mattered. She felt a shift in how she approached interactions with others. She started listening more closely, noticing the little signals of care from those around her. She responded to kindness with openness and allowed small connections to form. She began to see that relationships could be nurturing and sustaining when approached with patience and understanding. She also learned to give herself grace. She forgave herself for past mistakes, for moments of weakness, for times when she had withdrawn. She realized that compassion could start within, and that self-kindness was an essential part of healing. She felt a softening inside that made it easier to receive care from others. Over time, she began to trust the quiet presence more. She could share small pieces of her day without fear of judgment. She began to ask questions about the other person, learning about them and caring in return. She noticed a balance forming, a gentle rhythm of give and take, a natural connection that felt safe and real. She began imagining a future where loneliness did not dominate her experience. She imagined small adventures, shared laughter, long conversations, and quiet moments of comfort. She felt courage rising inside her, the courage to be seen, the courage to trust, and the courage to hope. She remembered the days when she had felt invisible, and she contrasted them with now. She noticed the weight lifting, the smile becoming more real, the laughter coming more easily. She realized that even small, consistent gestures of care had a profound impact. She began to believe in the possibility of enduring connection. Her mind felt quieter at night. She could lie in bed and reflect without being overwhelmed by fear. She could remember moments of care and support and feel gratitude. She could imagine tomorrow and feel readiness rather than dread. She began to see herself as worthy of attention and care. She began to notice the impact of small acts of kindness everywhere. She smiled at strangers. She listened more intently. She reached out in subtle ways. She realized that connection is a chain of small moments, each one building trust and understanding. She felt empowered by this realization. She also noticed the slow change inside herself. She felt lighter, more open, more willing to engage with the world. She noticed that her energy had returned gradually, her curiosity and interest in people and life rekindled. She began to see possibilities where before she had only seen barriers. Her heart felt more open. She allowed herself to imagine future possibilities, to dream small and large dreams. She felt hope, growing not in bursts but steadily as she noticed consistency and care. She began to understand that healing and connection were gradual and required. Patience started to embrace the present. She focused on small moments, noticing the beauty and warmth around her. She let herself experience joy. Without guilt, she let herself receive care. Without fear, she began to live each day, more fully appreciating small gestures and quiet support. And through all of this, she learned that sometimes the most important thing is simply to be present to another person, to show care without expectation, to listen without judgment, to offer support without conditions. She learned that connection can be quiet, steady, and transformative. She began to understand that life could hold pain and joy simultaneously, and that both could coexist. She could feel sadness without being overwhelmed. She could feel happiness without shame. She began to build a life where the presence of someone who cared made even the ordinary moments meaningful. Days passed, and she began to feel a small change inside her. It was subtle at first, like a gentle stirring of warmth in her chest. She noticed that mornings were easier. The quiet dread that used to greet her seemed lighter, and she could breathe more deeply. She started to feel curiosity returning, the kind she had not felt in a long time, about the world and the people around her. He continued to show quiet consistency without demanding attention or rushing her. He left small notes of encouragement and offered simple gestures that mattered more than words. She noticed that she could share little pieces of herself with him, and that her words were received with care. She began to feel that her feelings were valid, that her experiences mattered, that someone was willing to be present through them. She started leaving her office earlier some days just to take a walk. She noticed the way sunlight fell through the trees, the way birds moved in the wind. She felt a sense of calm that she had forgotten existed. She carried these moments with her like treasures, small reminders that life held gentle beauty even when the world seemed heavy. One afternoon, she shared a story from her childhood. She spoke about a moment that had shaped her, a lesson learned, and a fear that had never fully left her. She watched carefully as he listened, his attention steady and kind, and she felt a strange relief wash over her. The act of telling felt freeing, as if a weight had been lifted from her chest. She began to recognize the pattern of trust forming between them. Small moments of sharing, small gestures of care, small acknowledgments of presence. She realized that the bond was not built in grand gestures, but in quiet, steady attention and patience. She felt a gratitude that grew slowly and filled her with a sense of belonging she had not known before. Her evenings were no longer filled only with silence and longing. She started taking quiet walks or sitting by the window, watching the world change. She reflected on the day and noticed the small victories, the little steps forward. She realized that even in sadness there was progress, even in loneliness there was hope, and the presence of someone who cared made all the difference. She found herself thinking about the future in small ways, imagining moments she could share with him, small experiences she could enjoy together. She felt a gentle excitement at the thought of companionship, of knowing that someone could understand without needing explanations. She began to believe that life could be lived with support and trust rather than constant isolation. The night still brought moments of fear and doubt, but they were less consuming. She could recall the quiet presence that had become part of her life and feel strength. She realized that enduring care could create resilience that she had thought impossible. She began to see that hope was not fragile when nurtured by consistent presence. She started noticing her own growth. She laughed more freely, smiled without forcing it, and allowed herself to feel simple joys. She began to see herself in a new light, noticing her strength, her ability to endure, and her capacity for connection. She felt a quiet pride in these small achievements that had once seemed unattainable. Her interactions with others began to shift. She listened more carefully, noticed the subtle signals of care, and responded with openness. She allowed herself to be part of conversations without fear of judgment. she began to feel that connection could be gentle and sustaining, that relationships could be built on patience and understanding rather than expectation. She also began to notice the ways she cared in return. Small acts of kindness offered quietly, gestures of support given without thought of reward. She found joy in noticing the needs of others and responding in ways that felt natural and sincere. She began to understand the cycle of care and how it could nurture both giver and receiver. Her trust in him grew slowly but steadily. She could share details of her day, speak her thoughts and fears, and feel secure. She realized that the bond was strengthened not by intensity but by consistency. She allowed herself to believe that she could rely on someone, and that trust was not a weakness, but a strength. The world felt fuller. She noticed details she had ignored before: the changing seasons, the laughter of children, the rhythm of life around her. She felt part of a larger world and began to see her place within it. She experienced a quiet joy in simply being present and witnessing life unfold. She began to reflect on her past with a gentleness she had never allowed herself. She forgave moments of fear and withdrawal, acknowledged the struggles she had endured, and felt pride in surviving. She realized that healing was not about forgetting, but about accepting and moving forward. Small routines became comforting. She looked forward to walks, to coffee, to moments of quiet conversation. She began to anticipate these interactions, not as obligations, but as parts of life that brought meaning. She noticed that the predictability offered security and a sense of connection that reinforced her trust. Her awareness of emotions deepened. She could recognize fear, sadness, hope, and joy without being overwhelmed. She began to understand the ebb and flow of feelings and how to navigate them. She realized that emotions were signals, not barriers, and that sharing them could create intimacy and understanding. Moments of beauty everywhere. She saw patterns in the clouds, heard music in the wind, felt joy in small achievements. She realized that life had texture and depth that had been invisible when loneliness dominated. Her mind began to open to wonder. In curiosity, she began to feel hope more fully. She imagined possibilities for herself, for the future, for moments shared with him. She felt courage rising from the consistency of care, from the recognition of her own strength, from the realization that she was not alone. She began to trust that life could be different, that she could be supported and loved. She reflected on the nights she had cried alone and saw the contrast with evenings spent sharing thoughts and feelings. She noticed the shift from despair to comfort, from isolation to connection. She realized that small, consistent acts of presence could transform a life that had felt heavy with loneliness. Her heart opened to new experiences. She allowed herself to engage more deeply with the world, to participate in conversations, to notice details. She began to enjoy small pleasures fully: the taste of food, the warmth of sunlight, the sound of laughter. She realized that life could be savored when one felt seen and supported. She also noticed how patience played a role in her growth. She realized that trust and connection could not be forced, only nurtured. She began to appreciate the quiet persistence that he showed, the willingness to be present without rushing her. She felt gratitude for this patience and allowed herself to mirror it in her own actions. She started noticing her own resilience. She recognized the courage it took to face each day, to share pieces of herself, to accept care. She began to see herself as capable and worthy. She felt a growing confidence that she could handle challenges and embrace joy at the same time. The days became richer. She could find meaning in small moments, the rhythm of daily life, the subtle signs of kindness, the quiet presence of someone who cared. She began to feel life as a tapestry of moments woven together by connection and understanding. Realized that she could feel multiple emotions at once: sadness, joy, fear, hope. She understood that complexity did not weaken her, that it enriched her experience. She began to embrace this complexity as part of being human and felt less afraid of vulnerability. She started imagining small plans for the future, moments she could enjoy and experiences she could share. She felt excitement without pressure, a sense of possibility without fear. She began to feel agency over her life, recognizing that she could take steps toward joy and connection. Her mind became calmer. She could reflect on events without being overwhelmed. She could notice progress she had made, appreciate the care she received, and plan for meaningful interactions. She began to feel a sense of stability that had been absent for a long time. She Notice the quiet impact of attention and care she could feel the difference it made to have someone consistently present. She realized that human connection was powerful, not always in dramatic ways, but in steady, unassuming ways. She began to see life through this lens. She allowed herself to be more spontaneous, to laugh, to express herself without fear. She noticed a freedom that had been missing, a lightness of being. She began to experience life not as a series of burdens, but as moments to be lived fully and shared with someone who cared. She began to recognize the value of her own presence. She could offer kindness, compassion, and understanding. She felt that her contributions to relationships mattered and were received. She began to feel her existence as meaningful in a way she had not felt before. Started noticing the subtle changes inside her, the ability to feel hope, the willingness to trust, the openness to connection. She realized that healing was a process, not a destination, and that each small step mattered. She began to embrace this journey with patience and curiosity. Her awareness of herself and others deepened. She noticed the importance of listening attentively, offering care without expectation, and being present. She began to integrate these lessons into daily life, appreciating the richness of human interaction and the power of steady support. She began to feel a sense of belonging. She could imagine a life where she was valued, where her presence mattered, where care was mutual. She began to trust that connection could be enduring and fulfilling. She felt a quiet confidence that she could navigate life with support and resilience, and as she reflected on her journey, she felt gratitude for the quiet moments, for the small gestures, for the consistency and patience. She realized that transformation often comes slowly through everyday acts of care and the willingness to be present, and she felt a deep sense of peace. The day felt heavier than usual. She woke up with a tightness in her chest and a shadow over her thoughts. It was one of those mornings when everything felt too much, and the loneliness seemed to fill the room. She moved slowly, getting ready for the day, each motion feeling like a small effort. She thought about the hours ahead and felt a quiet dread at work. She tried to focus, but the heaviness stayed. Her mind wandered to old memories and fears she thought she had left behind. The small victories of the past weeks felt distant and fragile. She wondered if the progress she had made was only temporary, if the walls she had started to tear down would rise again. She felt uncertainty pressing down on her. He noticed her hesitation, the way she paused at her desk, the slight slump in her shoulders. He did not ask questions at first, simply walked over with a quiet calm that seemed to fill the space around her. He placed a cup of tea gently on her desk and nodded, a simple gesture that said, "I see you," without demanding a response. She looked at him and for a moment considered retreating. She felt the old impulse to withdraw, to close off and hide. She wanted to tell him that she could handle things alone, that she did not need anyone, but she also noticed the steadiness in his eyes, the quiet patience that had become familiar. She felt a flicker of hope. He sat nearby, not too close, not too far, giving her space yet letting her know he would not leave. He did not speak, he did not push. He simply was present, and that presence spoke louder than any words. She felt a tension inside her slowly begin to ease as she realized she could let someone be there without needing to perform or explain. She took a sip of tea and felt warmth spread through her chest. The simple act grounded her. She began to speak softly about the heaviness she felt, the fear that had returned. She expected him to react or try to fix things, but he only listened, his attention steady and kind. She felt a strange relief as she let the words flow slowly. For the first time in months, hours passed, and she continued to share small pieces of herself, the worries, the sadness, the fleeting thoughts of giving up. He remained present, not saying much, but giving her space to be heard. She noticed that speaking aloud made the fears lighter, as if they had less power when witnessed by someone who would not leave. The afternoon came, and the office was quieter than usual. She felt the weight pressing less heavily now that she had shared. She noticed the simple gestures, the cup of tea, the quiet attention, the presence that did not demand. She realized that these moments mattered more than grand acts, that they were enough to provide comfort and stability. She remembered the nights she had spent alone, crying silently, and contrasted them with the quiet moments now. she could feel a shift, a new possibility. That she could face fear and sadness without being overwhelmed. She noticed that hope was returning in small increments, carried on the quiet support she had received. He finally spoke softly, offering words of reassurance without forcing optimism. He said nothing dramatic, only that he was there, that she did not have to face the heaviness alone. That simple statement felt like a bridge across the emptiness. She felt tears threaten again, but this time they were not only of sadness, they carried relief and a sense of being seen. As the day ended, she realized that her chest felt lighter. Her thoughts were still complex, but she could navigate them. Without panic, she noticed that the presence of someone willing to stay could change the way she experienced even the heaviest emotions. She began to feel that trust and connection were stronger than fear. Evening, she took a quiet walk outside, feeling the cool air on her face. The world seemed sharper, more alive, the sounds, the smells, the movements around her. She felt a sense of grounding that had been absent before, and she noticed that even in the darkness there were small signs of light. She allowed herself to feel the relief that came from being supported. She remembered the small steps she had taken over the weeks, the trust slowly building, the consistency of care and attention. She realized that even in moments of fear and heaviness, there was a foundation to rely on. She began to internalize the idea that someone would not abandon her, and that realization brought courage. The next days were not perfect. There were moments when sadness returned stronger than before, and she had to work to steady herself. But she noticed that she could reach out without fear. She could speak her feelings without shutting down. She could lean on the presence of someone who had proven steady and caring. She felt that resilience was being built within her. She began to notice the pattern of support, the way trust deepened. Through simple acts of presence, she could share fears and hopes alike and receive understanding. She realized that connection was not about grand gestures, but about showing up consistently and quietly. She felt grateful for this realization and allowed it to anchor her. Even mundane moments felt infused with new meaning. She noticed the small gestures around her, the way coworkers smiled, the way someone offered a cup of coffee, the subtle kindnesses that she had once overlooked. She began to see the world through a lens of possibility, noticing that support existed even in small forms. She also began to practice gentleness toward herself. She acknowledged her fears and sadness without judgment. She allowed herself to rest without guilt, to accept care without shame. She noticed that this self-compassion strengthened her ability to connect and trust. She began to feel a softening inside that allowed her to breathe more freely. In the evenings, she began to journal quietly, reflecting on her thoughts. She recorded the moments of connection, the feelings of relief, the small steps forward. She noticed patterns of growth and resilience that she had not seen before. She began to recognize her own capacity for healing and for allowing support to enter her life. She took small risks in letting someone closer. She shared memories, long-buried thoughts, and fleeting dreams. She noticed that each act of sharing brought relief and strengthened the trust between them. She began to feel the possibility of being understood in a way that she had never experienced. She started noticing joy in small ways, the taste of tea, the warmth of sunlight, the softness of a quiet conversation. She realized that life held beauty even in ordinary moments. She felt gratitude for these experiences and began to anticipate them. Rather than dread the passage of time, she reflected on her growth, comparing the isolation of the past to the presence. Fear, she could feel courage. She began to understand that vulnerability did not mean weakness, that allowing someone to stay strengthened her sense of self and trust in life. She noticed how patience played a role in her progress. She realized that healing and connection took time, that it could not be rushed. She began to appreciate the quiet persistence of someone willing to be there. She allowed herself to mirror that patience in her interactions, and in her own process of opening up, her heart began to feel lighter. She laughed quietly in moments of amusement. She smiled naturally at gentle gestures. She allowed herself to feel simple happiness. She began to embrace the ebb and flow of emotions, understanding that both fear and joy could coexist, and that connection could sustain her through them. She began to imagine a future with hope, imagining shared moments, simple joys, supportive interactions. She felt courage growing from knowing that someone would stay. She began to trust that life could hold support and care and that she could allow herself to rely on that without fear. She reflected on the nights of isolation and contrasted them with evenings filled with quiet presence. She noticed the power of simple acts of care to transform experience. She realized that connection was built not on intensity, but on consistency, patience, and gentle attention. She felt grateful for this understanding. She began to notice the rhythm of trust forming. She could share thoughts, fears, hopes, and dreams and know that they were received. She began to recognize the strength in allowing herself to be seen. She felt a quiet courage that grew with each shared moment. Her awareness of the world expanded. She noticed beauty and kindness all around the small details that she had once ignored. She felt a renewed sense of curiosity and interest in life. She began to embrace experiences with openness and gratitude. She also recognized her own strength. She acknowledged the challenges she had faced, the courage it took to keep going, the resilience built from enduring loneliness.
Wow.
She began to appreciate the journey and the capacity she had developed to accept care and nurture connection. Even as challenges returned, she noticed her ability to respond differently. She could face moments of fear without retreating. She could allow presence to comfort and support. She began to understand that strength could coexist with vulnerability. Her life began to feel fuller. She noticed the moments of joy, small victories, and quiet support. She felt a sense of belonging she had not known. She began to trust that connection could endure and that life could hold both challenge and comfort. She reflected on the process, noticing how gradual and steady change had been. She recognized the impact of patience, presence, and quiet care. She felt gratitude for each small moment that had contributed to her growth. She began to feel a deep sense of peace in knowing that she was not alone. She allowed herself to dream again, small dreams, moments of connection, and simple joys. She felt hope for the future, courage to face challenges, and trust in the consistency of care. She began to feel that life could be lived with support, understanding, and loved. As she lay down to rest that night, she felt the heaviness lift slightly. She noticed the difference between past isolation and the presence she now allowed. She realized that healing was ongoing and that trust could grow steadily. She felt comforted knowing that she did not have to face the darkness alone. The mornings started to feel lighter. She woke up with a small sense of calm that had not been there for months. The heaviness that had once pressed on her chest was now softer and easier to manage. She noticed the quiet world outside the window, the soft light, and the gentle sounds of life moving around her. She felt a strange comfort knowing she was not alone at work. She carried herself differently. She moved with a little more confidence, a little more openness. She noticed small interactions with others with curiosity rather than fear. She smiled naturally at moments of kindness and allowed herself to enjoy the subtle warmth of connection. She realized that even small gestures mattered and could shape the rhythm of her day. He continued to be present without forcing attention or rushing her. She found that she could share more freely without fear of judgment. She spoke about her day, her thoughts, her hopes, and even her lingering fears. She noticed that he listened with steady patience and care. She began to trust that the bond between them could withstand moments of uncertainty and heaviness. Over time, she started to embrace small routines that brought comfort. She enjoyed quiet walks after work, moments of reflection by the window, cups of tea, shared conversations. These simple rituals grounded her and reminded her that life could hold stability. She noticed that consistency nurtured her trust and allowed her to grow more confident in her interactions. She began to see her own strength more clearly, the courage it took to face each day, to speak her feelings, to allow herself to be supported was no longer hidden. She acknowledged her resilience and felt pride in the progress she had made. She understood that healing was not about perfection, but about the small steps forward she had taken each day. Evenings became moments of reflection and gentle joy. She noticed the stars outside the window, the cool breeze on her skin, the quiet hum of the world. She allowed herself to feel gratitude for the small comforts, the gestures of care, and the moments of understanding. She began to appreciate life not only for the big events, but for the quiet, steady presence of support. She started imagining the future in ways she had never dared before. Small adventures, simple joys, moments of laughter shared quietly. She felt hope stirring alongside caution. she understood that life could still hold challenges, but she felt prepared to face them with someone by her side. She allowed herself to believe that connection could endure. Her fears did not disappear entirely, but they lost their power. She could notice them without being overwhelmed. She could reach out when heaviness returned and feel comfort. In the presence of someone who cared, she began to recognize that vulnerability was not weakness, and that allowing herself to be seen was a source of strength. She started taking small risks in daily life, sharing more openly her thoughts, her dreams, her ideas. She noticed that each act of sharing built trust. She could feel the bond growing not through grand gestures, but through quiet, steady attention. She began to understand that connection was nurtured by consistency. In cars, she began to enjoy ordinary moments more fully, the taste of food, the warmth of sunlight, the sounds of life around her. She allowed herself to laugh freely without guilt, to feel joy without fear. She noticed that happiness could coexist with sadness, and that both could be experienced fully when she was supported. Her sense of self expanded. She recognized her own value, the importance of her presence, and the impact of her actions. She felt capable of offering care and receiving it. She noticed that the world seemed richer when she allowed herself to participate rather than retreat. She began to see her life as meaningful and connected. Reflected on the journey from isolation to trust, she remembered the nights of solitude, the heaviness of fear, the doubts and the self-imposed walls. She contrasted them with the quiet comfort of steady presence and the moments of shared understanding. She felt gratitude for the journey and the lessons she had learned. She began to notice that hope had become more permanent. She could imagine plans for the days ahead. Moments of joy, connection, and learning. She felt courage arising from her ability to face challenges with support. She realized that life could hold multiple emotions simultaneously, and that she could navigate them with growing confidence. Small gestures continued to shape her experience. She appreciated a kind word, a shared coffee, a quiet conversation. She began to see the rhythm of caring in daily life and felt strengthened by it. She realized that relationships could be sustained through patience, understanding, and attention to small details. She noticed how she had grown in patience and compassion toward herself. She forgave past mistakes, acknowledged her fears, and accepted her limits. She allowed herself to rest and recover when needed. She recognized that self-kindness was essential to accepting care from others and building enduring trust. She continued to build routines that grounded her. She cherished moments of reflection, walks, shared moments with someone present, and small rituals that brought comfort. She felt that life could be organized in ways that nurtured her emotional well-being and strengthened her ability to engage fully with the world. She began to notice joy emerging naturally. She laughed more freely, smiled more openly, and allowed herself to enjoy experiences without fear. She felt a lightness in her chest, a freedom she had not known before. She began to understand that happiness was not fleeting, but could be nurtured through presence and consistency. Her heart opened more fully to trust. She could rely on someone without fear of abandonment. She allowed herself to be vulnerable, knowing that care would be steady. She noticed the richness of connection that arose when both gave and received support. She felt a deep sense of security that had been absent in the past. She started thinking about long-term possibilities, sharing small dreams and plans. She imagined quiet adventures, simple moments of joy and comfort. She felt excitement without pressure and hope without fear. She realized that life could hold fulfillment when shared with someone trustworthy. Her emotional resilience grew. She could face challenges without panic. She could experience sadness without despair, and she could embrace joy without guilt. She noticed that her capacity for living fully had expanded through trust, care, and consistent support. She began to feel empowered by her own growth. She allowed herself to reflect on the journey with gratitude. She noticed each small step, each shared moment, each gesture of care that had contributed to her healing. She felt a deep sense of accomplishment and hope. She realized that change is gradual but possible, and that connection can transform even the heaviest hearts. Her awareness of life deepened. She noticed beauty and kindness all around. She observed the patterns of the world, the small gestures of others, and the quiet rhythms of daily life. She began to live with attention and appreciation, noticing that even ordinary moments could carry meaning. She continued to practice gentleness with herself. She acknowledged her needs, expressed them without fear, and allowed herself to rest when needed. She realized that caring for herself was part of sustaining her ability to trust and connect with others. She felt a new sense of harmony in her life. She allowed herself to dream bigger. She imagined experiences she could enjoy, connections she could nurture in life that could feel meaningful. She felt courage and curiosity building inside her. She realized that the presence of someone steady allowed her to explore possibilities she had once thought impossible. Her interactions became more meaningful. She could offer attention, understanding, and care to others while receiving the same. She noticed the impact of steady presence in shaping connection and trust. She felt empowered to be both giver and receiver in relationships. She reflected on the continuity of support and its impact. She realized that the moments that mattered were often small, quiet acts that built trust and comfort over time. She appreciated the slow unfolding of connection and the stability it brought to her life. Her evenings became times of gratitude, reflection, and peace. She noticed the calm in her mind, the openness in her heart, and the warmth of steady presence. She allowed herself to feel contentment without fearing vulnerability and hope. Without fearing loss, she felt a deep sense of belonging. She recognized her place in the world and the impact of connection. She could feel joy, sadness, hope, and fear without being overwhelmed. She began to understand that life could be lived fully when supported and understood. She continued to grow in trust, patience, and openness. She allowed herself to embrace experiences fully, to engage with others meaningfully, and to navigate emotions with resilience. She felt a quiet strength that came from connection and care. She noticed that love and care could be expressed in quiet, steady ways. She valued the small gestures, the consistent presence, the patient attention. She understood that these built the foundation for enduring connection. She felt grateful for these lessons and the peace they brought her. Heart and mind opened fully. She could experience joy, sadness, hope, and courage simultaneously. She allowed herself to trust the future and embrace possibility. She felt a deep sense of peace, knowing that she did not have to face life alone, and in that awareness, she realized the power of staying and being present. She had experienced loneliness, fear, and doubt, but she had also experienced steady care, connection, and trust. She understood that life could hold all of these, and that growth came from allowing support and nurturing connection. She could now face each day with courage, knowing that she was not alone. She could dream with hope, feel fully with resilience and trust. That steady presence could transform even the heaviest moments. She had learned that sometimes the greatest gift is simply knowing that someone is not going anywhere.